The Pacers and Myles Turner reportedly opening up contract extension talks. Big change to have this come out via report in the middle of the season. Talk about what it means, what that deal could look like, why this could have come out, what it means for trades. So many ripple effects, so many things to talk about with this. And Pacers-Pelicans tonight. We get to it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI. And today, boy, oh boy, is there big news to get to if you're looking for stuff on Tyrese Haliburton's magnificent game in Miami. That came out on Saturday on a bonus podcast. Today, we're talking all about the report from Shams Charania in The Athletic. The Pacers and Myles Turner are open to discussions on a potential contract extension. That is stunning news right before Christmas. And look, we've covered it here on Locked On Pacers already. The mechanics of what it could look like, what Turner would want, what the Pacers would want, the pros and cons of it. But now that it's out there, it has impacts on the trade market. It has impacts on what you can think of, what the Pacers' approach to all this is. It obviously impacts Turner and his money. And there's a lot to this. We're going to cut through all the layers today before talking Pacers-Pelicans to close out the show. So we'll just start by diving right into this. This from Shams Charania on Friday. The main headline you need to know. First paragraph of his story in The Athletic. The Indiana Pacers and center Myles Turner have opened up contract extension discussions and are exploring a potential new deal. League sources with direct knowledge of the discussions tell The Athletic. I'm paraphrasing the end of the paragraph. Lots of meat in there about Turner's background, his fit with the new team, and the big part of this is it discusses the renegotiation and extension, right? The fact that because the Pacers have salary cap space, they can offer Turner more money this year plus future deals on an extension. It mentions his agent by name, and it says that extension conversations are still at an initial phase, but the key part is it discusses the renegotiation and extension and not a standard extension. I'll get into why that is important later. It still says the Pacers are going to continue to be open-minded in the trade market and discusses some teams interested in Turner. We'll talk about those in the second segment, but that is the meat and potatoes. Pacers and Turner open to contract extension discussion. The fact that this would even come out as news, as a report, is fascinating. A look, right? A lot of this stuff just happens sometimes. This one is out in public, right? So Turner will presumably answer questions about it, as will Rick Carlisle, at some point when they're back home and we can talk to them. But look, the same thing I said when I discussed the permutations of this. If the Pacers truly believe that Turner is their guy at center, right? He's 26. He fits with Tyrese Haliburton and Benedict Mathurin. He's had a resurgent season playing a new style. He's definitely been inconsistent still. This month especially has had some rougher games. But if they believe he's the guy, it makes sense why they would want this, why the Pacers would want this. Like a lot of times when I talk about the Pacers' core and their ages and their timeline, you look at 25 and younger in these young ages, right? Even Kevin Pritchard said, when you think longer term, which they were talking about before the season started, it skews younger. Turner's 26, and he's barely outside of what I have always talked about. That's not so crazy, especially when the team is better than I think most thought they would be before the season started. So he fits the team's style. He's been here a while. He fits with their two, most promising young players at a key position. Like all that stuff suggests that, yeah, maybe it does make sense to keep him long-term, even if there are a ton of risks involved with it. And I don't think it's cut and dry. I don't think this should be something the Pacers should be tripping all over themselves to do, but I get why they would do it. I think there are pros and cons to it that make a lot of sense. Of course, the inconsistency makes it not perfect. And the big one is too, like this core looks promising right now. They're, over 500 at Christmas, but they haven't played a playoff game yet. You have no idea what they need in the setting of what they want to be. They would like to win postseason series in the future. They would like to make a run at some sort of Eastern Conference title, NBA title, whatever, at some point. That's the purpose of thinking longer term is more pain now for more gain later. They have no idea how this core fits together in a postseason setting. That has to matter in this discussion, and it's not something they can know with Turner unless they extend it. That's not a reason to or not to extend him. It's just part of the risk that they have to consider is with the inconsistency, without knowing what he looks like in a playoff setting with these guys, that's a question mark to add to this. But let me add some context for you before you listen to these numbers, right? Turner got his 4-year, $80 million deal. Really, it's $72 million. There's some incentives he hasn't hit to get to 80 for making like all defense, defensive player of the year, stuff like that. Either way, like $18 million a year in 2018 on a 4-year deal. The salary cap back then was in the mid 90 millions, right? So even if you don't think Turner has improved at all, and not at all since then, in 4 years since he was 22, if you think Myles Turner is the exact same player and hasn't improved a lick, I think there are people who think that. I'm not arguing with that at the moment. I'm just, if you think that way, the salary cap now is over 120 million. In fact, it's close to 130 next season. So even if you think that Turner is the same level of impact player, just based on percent of the salary cap that he's making or was worth in 2018, he'd be worth a raise on that alone. And that is roughly a 1/3 raise in the cap, which would put his salary like at 24 million-ish, right? That alone is why he is probably worthy of a pay bump come free agency, come whatever. And if you look at a standard contract extension for Myles Turner, the extension that you hear about every other player getting, Malcolm Brogdon just got this from the Pacers last year, standard veteran extensions, that are limited at a 120% pay bump of a player's final year heading into said extension. For Turner, that would be less than, or to me at least, that would be not quite as much as that cap jump percentage. And it's a number that he could get in free agency anyway. And that's why the renegotiation and extension has always made the most sense to me. You've heard me talk about it on Locked On Pacers before, if you listen all the time, and why it's the thing being reported. It's the way that the Pacers can give Turner a lot of money before he hits free agency, which helps him, helps them. That makes sense, keeps him out of free agency, and extends his deal, allows him to grow with this core. That's why this all is pieced together in a way that makes sense. So there's all the background I think you need on the situation, how it got here. Now, renegotiation and extensions, if you don't know or have not heard me talk about them before, are fascinating. I wrote about this in Forbes Sports. If you want to look it up, just find my page with Pacers articles there. But what a renegotiation extension is if a team has cap space, and the Pacers do, and a player has been under contract for at least 3 years of a 4 or more year deal, there's a lot of stipulations involved. The team can use some of that cap space to elevate a player's salary and then also extend their deal. And how it works is, what you can do is you can bump up the salary a bunch, and then in future seasons of the contract, you can drop it from that first year by as much as 40%, which is a humongous drop. And then raises are now based on how much the salary was raised in the renegotiated year, which is also tricky. Look, it's not worth getting into the mechanics of this, and you don't have to drop the salary by 40%. It could be 30%. There's so many permutations with this. Like, usually when I am listing the parameters of, what a player's maximum extension is, I can type it out very easily and say it has to be more than this and less than this. In this case, there really is, I guess the max is a max contract. Myles Turner is not worth a max contract, but there are so many permutations because there's this huge drop that isn't really possible in a lot of other deals that I can't really get into all those mechanics. But just as an example, right, because the Pacers have $24.5 million, $25 million of cap space right now, and Myles Turner makes $19.1 million less than his $37.1 million max this season, 30% of the salary cap. In theory, the Pacers could reroute all of the cap space possible and bump Turner's salary up to his max this season, $37.0965 million, right? They're allowed to do that. And then they could, that would be his salary this season. And the next season, in an extension, they could add on a year that drops that by 40% down to $22.25 million. And then the raises would be a maximum of $1.18 million per year, which is a certain percentage of the raise he got this year in the renegotiation. It's very confusing, but that is what it would be. So you add $1.2 million every year, you get a total of $96 million. 4 years, $96 million added, as well as $19 million added this year. So then the Pacers have given Myles Turner a 4-year, $115 million extension with new money, effectively. They aren't allowed to offer that as a veteran extension. That's not legal. That's not possible, right? But in free agency this summer, right, if you're trying to think of giving this guy a deal that starts at the same percentage of the salary cap, that $24 million, you're going to get close to that 4 for $115. Now, they don't have to bump his salary all the way up to the max, right? They don't have to drop it as far as 40%. And I think 4 for $115 is probably like the precipice, the maximum that Turner would be worth in free agency this summer. I don't think it should be that high, to be totally clear. That's just an example of the many things that this could look like. But the story of this is not the mechanics of the cap. It is that because the Pacers have started strong, they're 17-16, because Turner has started strong, having career numbers and a bunch of stats. November was probably the best month of his career. December hasn't been as good, but it's still been good. And because he fits with the Pacers' strong young core players, open extension talks have popped up, according to reports. Now, Turner recently signed with a new agent, right? There could be a lot going on here beyond what the headline says, and that's also worth talking about. There's a lot to this. And I think that the trade element is a big part of this, and there's a chicken and egg element going on with deadlines and the Pacers cap space, and there's a lot of posturing going on, potentially posturing going on, I should say, that I want to get into. How does this affect the trade market? How does this news impact the Pacers' potential trade of Myles Turner? Let's talk about that. Hey guys, let's take one short little break so I can talk to you about BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can find all the latest and all your favorite sports and amateur league out there. College bowl season, basketball, pro football. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. The World Cup just wrapped up. It was on there as well. And then if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting info. Tonight, the Colts. That's right, the Indianapolis Colts, Monday Night Football, again for some reason, hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are favored by 4 in that game. All those lines and more over at BetOnline.net. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Hop on over to Locked On NBA for your second listen to get the latest and greatest from around the association with our local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. But right now, I'm talking about the Pacers specifically and Myles Turner, contract extension stuff. There's a lot of reasons for the Pacers to do it. There's a lot of reasons for the Pacers not to do it. There's also a lot going on for the Pacers with Myles Turner that isn't related to this. How does this affect his trade market, right? Look, Myles Turner's been mentioned in trade rumors forever and ever. My stance has been the same all season as it's been basically since these popped up in around the draft for any trade rumor with him is if he can't extend, they have to explore trading him. Myles Turner said that himself on the Woj Pod, right? I'm on an expiring contract. They have to think about doing that. They can't lose me for nothing. This is all repeated info, but important backstory here. If there's no extension for Turner, it makes sense for the team to explore trading him. In fact, they should probably aggressively do so if they are thinking long-term in the first year of a rebuild. All that said, look, there's a lot going on with this Turner stuff that I want to cut through and try to get to the bottom of. But I think the biggest factor here is this chicken and egg element that relates to an extension, right? The chicken and egg question of what came first, the chicken or the egg. How does that matter for the growth story of the chicken? Either way, Turner, to do the renegotiation extension, which is the only thing that makes sense and is reportedly what's being discussed by him and the Pacers, it uses cap space for the Pacers, right? And that alone is fine. It's not like using cap space is a big negative, but Kevin Pritchard always loves optionality and loves flexibility. And using cap space, especially a lot, for example, to give Turner a raise this year to get him extended, means they can't use that cap space in trades to get more assets, to make imbalance deals, to do things like that, right? So that would be the chicken side. Extending Turner with a renegotiation extension means you cannot use your cap space to do something else. However, using cap space to do something else, let's say they take in someone in the salary dump and get some assets along the way. Now you don't have as much money to renegotiate and extend Myles Turner. Pacers are below the salary floor, right? They would like to use that space for something. So maybe there is no trade that they love, and they do decide that using it on Turner is better. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but that is a huge element in this, is that those are not conflicting goals necessarily because they both benefit the Pacers, but from Turner's perspective, they kind of are conflicting goals, right? If he only will stay with the Pacers or sign an extension, if it comes with this renegotiation, the trade element from other stuff that doesn't involve him matters a great deal. And then there's also the trade element for Myles Turner himself, obviously. And a big part of this is the trade deadline is February 9th, right? By February 9th, all trades have to be done in the middle of that Thursday. The renegotiation extension deadline is March 1st, right? So the Pacers can say all the way up and through the deadline, hey, rival team that wants Myles Turner and is offering not as much as we want for our center, having a career year, but is on an expiring contract. A lot of factors in his value. They can say, hey, look, we have this deal agreed to right now. Are the Pacers being honest? I don't know what Turner would accept, what the parameters being explored are, but they can say this as a tactic, as a negotiation tool, and say, look, we could keep him. We could not trade him tomorrow. We could still have him on February 10th, but we'd have a means to keep him beyond this year. And that means we don't have to do this unless you up and meet our price. This, even if it's a bluff, this report or whatever, I don't know that it is or isn't, just pretend it is, it helps the Pacers negotiate. I think that's important to remember is there's always below the surface stuff with this stuff. I think that's really important that the deadline is after the trade deadline. If the deadline for renegotiations was February 1st, then, between the 1st and the 9th, there'd be some chaos, but it's after. So that is helpful for the Pacers. Veteran extensions can be signed past March 1st, but look, like I said, there's no reason for Turner to sign one of those, especially at that point. He could get the same deal in free agency, whereas a renegotiation, the deadline is March 1st. So that is all relevant info to know. This is going to make his situation at the trade deadline very fascinating. And a couple reminders. If he is renegotiated and extended and his renegotiation amount bumps his salary up by more than 5%, which if it doesn't, what the heck is the point of doing the renegotiation for Myles Turner? Assuming his salary is bumped up by more than 5%, he can't be traded for 6 months, right? So the trade deadline is only a month and a half away. No matter when a renegotiation and extension happens, if it happens between now and February 9th, Turner cannot be traded this season. They cannot renegotiate it, make his deal higher, and then flip him to another team. Not allowed, right? Another team could extend Turner after acquiring him, but it's only a very small extension, that 105% number that I just described. Remember, I believe the Rockets sort of half measure offered Victor Oladipo said extension amount before they traded him to Miami. It's usually not worth it for players who would like to get to free agency and see what they can get there. So a 5% raise when the cap's going up by more than 5%, there's just little point for players to accept that. So the Pacers are uniquely positioned with their cap space, with their team situation, with Turner to be the team that extends him, which helps them with leverage in this trade stuff. And I think there's a lot of other factors in trades going on that are fascinating here. Beyond Turner playing well this year, right? Beyond the value the Pacers want, beyond his expiring contract. That's all stuff that I have talked about a lot, right? They have to consider exploring it. Turner said that himself. I already said this segment. I apologize for repeating myself. That is all interesting layers to this. But another thing that is happening here, and the two teams were included in Charania's report as interested in trading for Myles Turner. And that's the Toronto Raptors and Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers have been talked about ad nauseum in Westbrook situations. There's non-Westbrook stuff, I guess, theoretically, but whatever. The Lakers are who they are. Their assets are what they are. The Raptors have been mentioned as a Turner suitor. I can't talk for years, right? Think about the teams that are at the top of your mind when you think of Turner suitors in the last 6 months, 1 year, whatever timeline you would like to use. Washington, Charlotte, Los Angeles Lakers, Toronto Raptors, in the past the Knicks, but now they have Mitchell Robinson, right? All this stuff. They're all having bad years. All the teams that are usually interested in a guy like Myles Turner, reportedly, they're having bad seasons. And that means they might be less enthused by the idea of giving up assets to get him to go for it this year, especially when he could leave in free agency, right? That is tricky for the Pacers. Their usual batch of, we got this team negotiating and this team, you got to up your price, we got all this stuff. If they have less teams interested because of their own struggles, that makes life difficult for the Pacers, right? They suddenly have maybe less interested suitors, or teams are less interested to go really aggressive to get Myles Turner. And so by adding in this negotiating tool, that is helpful for the Pacers. That is something else. Even if only one team is interested now, that team is not negotiating against nobody. They are negotiating against the Pacers, who can extend him, right? They have their own value placed on Turner that team now has to beat, right? I think that is extremely relevant in this, right? There's so much to this all coming out from Turner and the Pacers' perspective because, of course, he's good. The team, if they would like to keep him, if he would like to stay, and the only way to do it is this renegotiating extension, yes, they should absolutely explore. That makes sense. Myles Turner told Jalen Smith last year, get your money, young man. This is a way for Turner to get his money and potentially stay somewhere that he wants to stay. It helps the Pacers have the peace of mind and confidence that he's not going to leave in free agency by extending him. That all makes sense. But it also is helpful for the Pacers from a trade market perspective. That said, the extension is not without downsides, right? Again, I've never seen him in the postseason with this team. His inconsistency has been what it is for years and years. They have no idea what other types of centers fit well with their team. They have a ton of other young centers that they'll have to then consider what to do with if Turner's going to be the starter long term. There's a lot to it for them, and for Turner potentially exploring his own market. What is out there for him this summer? But there's a lot of layers to this that will evolve as time progresses, right? The Pacers' record on January 20th, likely more relevant than their record now when deciding how they want to approach things. Other teams' records, other injuries that could happen in a month will certainly influence how this goes. There's no point of saying the Pacers should do this now, right? If they get an amazing offer right the second, or Turner gives them agrees to an extension that's right in the range that they suggest, great. Yes, they should pursue that. But otherwise, I think this will still drag out for maybe a month, even longer. But I do think it's fascinating that, one, this even came out, and two, how much ripple effect it has on the Pacers planning, on other teams planning, on the trade market, on the timing of everything. And, his willingness to actually extend does say something. Could it affect his willingness to want to trade at some point? I don't know. This is all conjecture from me, just reading between the lines of what was reported. But I think it's all fascinating. It all is tied together with the Pacers' long-term team building plans. And I, as a cap dork, am looking forward to seeing how it unfolds. But also, as someone who covers basketball and loves the games, think that it's important to note that I feel like outside of the Pacers either getting home run value right now on either the extension or a trade, nothing will happen on this front to me until at least mid-January, probably later than that. But if you're a Pacers fan and you're looking for stuff that could change this, injuries, obviously, from another team starting center or to Turner himself, a big surge from the Pacers, right? If they're on a 2-game winning streak right now. Let's say they beat New Orleans and they beat Atlanta and they play the Clippers on New Year's Eve. I forget who the game in between is, but they win all these games. They're on a 6-game winning streak. They're firmly in the playoff picture. Maybe their goals change, right? There's a lot that could influence where this goes. But I think that right now it's important to be patient and just know that this extra consideration benefits basically every party involved for the Pacers. It benefits Turner by giving him another way to get more money. It benefits the Pacers by giving them more leverage in a situation. Because nobody loses, it makes sense for something like this to be discussed, but it still does not rule out anything else in terms of a trade or something else happening. So that is my 22-minute take on Turner and the Pacers being open to contract extension discussions. It makes a lot of sense to me because of the uniqueness of the Pacers situation. They are able to offer renegotiation and extension because of their situation. Very, very rarely does the situation pop up where this is possible, but currently that is the case. So we'll see where this ends up, and I am really looking forward to it. And hey, you know who Myles Turner's best game was against this season? The New Orleans Pelicans, who the Pacers played tonight, their first post-Christmas action of the season, and the Pelicans are hot. What's key in that game? Can Turner repeat his performance from mid-November? Let's talk about all that to close today's show. One more message here from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Picture this. You're hanging out with some friends, putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride? Nah, you think you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everybody knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everybody from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, easy peasy, Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison. So you can hear about the opponent tonight. The Pelicans are playing very good basketball and are finding the right roles for a lot of their good players. Recently, just thinking about the Pelicans is fascinating, right? When the Pacers played them, they were 8th or 7th in the West or something, slightly over 500 at that time. And they were good, like obviously a challenging team for the Pacers. And I've said a couple times before the Pacers just beat Boston on the road that was probably their best win of the season, right? That Pelicans team is good. They had really good players, all healthy, like fully healthy Pelicans. And the Pacers beat them handily. They played very well that game, right? Even still today, one of the best Pacers wins of the season. 129 on that good team, right? That was super, super impressive from the Pacers. And they looked great in that game. Pelicans since then have been fantastic. They're 3rd in the West now. They're 9-4 in the last month of real time. They look really, really good. They're a better team than they were when the Pacers played them in early November, right? They are fantastic. 6th in defense and 5th in offense. Being top 10 in both is crazy impressive, right? That is, that is hard to do. 3rd in net rating in the league. Most of their losses are to also really good teams, right? Like Utah's the only exception usually to this, but like their recent losses are Milwaukee, Phoenix, and Utah. That's all of the teams that have beat them in the last month. And the team before that, right before Thanksgiving, was Memphis. And the team before that beat them was Boston, right? They do not lose to bad teams. They are a good squad. And this will be a tough one for the Pacers, but Pacers also have some momentum, right? Just beat Boston, just beat Miami. Tyrese Halliburton's playing the best ball of his career over the last 5 games. That makes them threatening on any night, right? So this game will be so interesting to see how these two teams have grown in the time since they first played. And the Pacers' top guys in that first game were all sensational. Mather had an off night, I suppose. I shouldn't jump the gun. But, if you remember that game, Buddy Hield, 20 points. He hit 5 threes. Jalen Smith was still a starter, 15 and 11. Did an awesome job on Zion for some of that game. Myles Turner, one of his best career games, 37 points, 12 rebounds, got to the free throw line 11 times and made all of them. Andrew Nembhard, 15 points. Tyrese Halliburton had 20 and 13. Even TJ McConnell had 10 points on 4 or 5 shooting. Like, their key guys in that game were special, and that was a huge part of their win. They needed that. Myles Turner kicked Jonas Valanciunas' butt. Buddy Hield was fantastic, right? They needed that. They did something hard to do against New Orleans, and that's what I think will be key in this game. You look at the Pelicans this year, they're 6th in rebounding. They're a fantastic rebounding team. Valanciunas is a good rebounder. That's like his thing. Zion Williamson's a good rebounder. For their positions, CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram are decent rebounders, right? They're a good rebounding team. Pacers out-rebounded them, right? That was huge in that game. Turner doing well on the glass was huge, but also Jalen Smith doing well on the glass was huge. In the end, 45-43, Pacers win the rebounding battle. The other thing the Pelicans don't do very much, they don't let other teams get to the line that often, right? Not fouling is a good way to play defense. Pacers got to the line 23 times in that game, and we're drilling them all night. 21 of those go in. That was huge. That is not something that typically happens against the New Orleans Pelicans. So those things are obviously key. If the Pacers can rebound well again, and who knows what starting lineup the Pacers go with, right? When Nesmith was out in Miami, I thought maybe Jalen Smith would start, but they didn't, which matchup-wise, it made sense. They started Matherin, but it's usually been one of Smith, Nesmith. So I think Jalen Smith has been, maybe not permanently, but is more entrenched as a backup 5 now, which makes some sense. So we'll see if Nesmith is still hurt, what will happen. But those will be important again. But the biggest difference between New Orleans now and New Orleans then, and the reason they're surging so much, and the reason this game will be difficult, is 2 things. One is CJ McCollum has found a groove, right? He was off for a lot of time early in the season. He had 9 points in Indy on 3 of 11 shooting, right? He had 7 assists and 5 rebounds. He wasn't like a useless player, but his scoring was not popping yet. He had not quite fit. He had some good games to start the season, but his shooting percentages were not particularly strong early in the campaign. In his last 8 games, right, he is averaging 25.5 points per game on 46% shooting, 43% from deep, 6 rebounds, 6.5 assists. They're playing him at point guard, and it's working fantastic. TJ McCollum being in a groove, more so than he was early in the year, right? Not that he wasn't in a groove early in the year, but much less so than now, right? He just had a 40-point game, which obviously influences stuff a little bit. But leading up to the game against the Pacers, he was shooting 43%, 32% from deep, right? He has figured out some stuff. He looks better. That's big for the Pelicans because he's a good player. The other one is they've figured out this point Zion stuff, right? Zion Williamson, maybe not like de facto point guard, but they give him the ball on the perimeter and let him create a little bit more, whether that's attacking the basket via drives, whether that's passing, whatever. There's a million things he does differently now, and that has made him better and made the team harder to defend. In the month of December, Zion Williamson, 29 points per game on 62% shooting. I mean, that's just ridiculous. 10 free throw attempts per game, 8 rebounds per game, and the big one for points. Zion, 6 assists, right? He's becoming a tiny bit of a playmaker. He's so hard to cut off, and he's not like an advanced passer, but you send a double at him, and guess what? He can pass right out of that. So defending him, whoever gets the matchup, Nesmith, Smith, I don't think they'll go Matherin on him, but maybe they go Matherin on him if they have to. Like, it's hard. He's hard to defend. He's very good. So that is another thing that's huge and will be very tough. This will be a tough game, physical game. Like, Brandon Ingram's cold. Not cold as in like he's off right now. Like, ooh, that man is cold. They're a physical team. Valanciunas beats you up. Zion beats you up. Hernan Gomez beats you up off the bench. So I think in this game, important stuff. Turner, rebounding is huge for him, right? Not something he's been strong at recently, although he did do well on the glass against Miami has got to be something he does in this game. That was a big part of them beating the Pelicans the first time is he out-rebounded Jonas Valanciunas, right? He's got to do that again. Defense for him is always important. It's going to be tough against the Pels. He's got to do it. He's been destroyed by Valanciunas in games before. He did very well in November, but he's had some rougher games against Valanciunas in the past. He's got to be able to stretch him out and do well on the glass. But that 11 rebound game against Miami, perhaps the push he needs. Point of attack defense will be huge, right? Pelicans love to drive. They're third in the league in 2-pointers made per game. McCollum's been driving and doing well. Zion is. They have a lot of guys who can get to the rim. Stopping them at the basket is, of course, important. And they love to force turnovers. They force the third most in the league, 16 a game. Pacers have to do well. Taking care of the ball, Tyrese Haliburton, obviously playing some of the best basketball of his career right now. That is, of course, important for him. TJ McConnell, everybody who handles the ball for the Pacers is involved in turnovers, but the guys who have it the most, that is extra important. They had 17 when they played New Orleans back in November. That's probably a fine number. I think they would have loved to have less than that. Of course, Tyrese Haliburton had the 6 turnover game against Golden State, but then mostly 2 or 3 in his last run of games. He's been playing spectacular. He will need to continue to do so. So lots of keys, right? The big stuff. But the Pelicans' keys are a lot of fundamentals. Rebound, take care of the ball. Don't let them get to the line and live at the line like they love to. And you'll be in the game. New Orleans is tough. They're really tough. They're really physical. That has been sort of troubling for the Pacers this season. But guess what? They did very well against this Pelicans team early this season. Very well. And I think they can beat them on any night, including this one. We'll see how this one actually goes. I'm looking forward to it. I love watching this New Orleans team. And, of course, the Pacers are playing decently right now, right? They've been in every game for like 11 straight games. In the last 5 minutes, they've had clutch time, I think, in like every game they've played since they got back from the road trip. I think even against Minnesota to end the road trip they did. So they're in every game. They're playing really well. If they could just close a little better, they'd be looking awesome. But with the 2 wins they've had, closing games this past week, anything could happen. I think they've got a good shot against New Orleans, even though the Pelicans are really good. So who knows? Neutral site. I think these teams are about even. It's in New Orleans. We'll see how it goes. Thank you guys a ton for listening today. I hope you had a fantastic holiday, a fantastic Christmas, or whatever you celebrate, and got to spend some time with family. The weather, very crappy, traveling very hard. So I hope everybody had a fun and safe weekend. We'll be back tomorrow talking Pacers-Pels, previewing Pacers-Hawks, and talking about something else that happened in their game on Monday night. Thank you guys a ton for listening. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you soon.